So Nigerian President Muhammadu Buhari officially begins his state visit to South Africa at the Union Buildings this morning. His visit comes amid continued concerns about attacks on foreign nationals in South Africa. Buhari will co-chair the 9th South Africa-Nigeria Bi-National Commission with President Cyril Ramaphosa in Pretoria. Let's get the very latest now, and we're joined by Mzwandile Mbeje, who's at the Union Buildings for us. Mzwandile, thank you very much indeed for your time. So this is the first incoming state visit to be hosted by South Africa under the 6th administration. Tell us more.
Absolutely, Plain. It's quite a very important one that we are hosting one of the biggest economies on the African continent. Of course, coming against the backdrop of very tense relations between these two countries. This as a result of those attacks that you mentioned, Plain, that we witnessed a few weeks ago. Of course, there was an exchange between the two countries insofar as envoys are concerned to try and do the explanations. Recently, the special envoys that the president sent to Nigeria, Ghana, and other African countries came back, and he issued a statement to say they were very happy and they were very satisfied about the response that they got. You'd remember that President Buhari himself, after the attacks had happened, had sent his special envoy to South Africa to really try and understand what was happening, because we had seen the foreign minister that side issuing a very strong statement to say South Africa will have to pay for what they are doing. But it would appear that they are mending the fences, and this state visit Plain will then underscore those relations that exist between these two countries. And it's very important, again, for President Ramaphosa, who is hosting his first incoming state visit, that it be Nigeria. Remember, South Africa and Nigeria are basically the leaders of the African continent, and the African continent basically looks up to these two giants. If these two giants are not able to speak with one voice, or if they don't see eye to eye, so you can rest assured that the progression, or rather the progress of this continent, will be somehow stunted. So this episode that we are seeing today is to try and get back those relations to really benefit the people. Yeah. So what I have really seen, and as I'm observing what this is that there does seem to be some good relations perhaps between the governments, but perhaps where they would need to work perhaps hardest would be onto people-to-people relations, because it appears that front is not covered well. If you looked at some of the shops that were looted, and of course some of the accusations that South Africans are leveling against some of the foreign nationals, particularly the Nigerians, who they are accusing of peddling the issue of drugs. So yes, this will focus mainly Plain on the economic aspect and trade relations, and of course in politics and diplomacy, but that issue of attacks will certainly come up. Nigeria has made it clear that the issue of compensation is very crucial for them.
Yeah, and South African government has expressed regret with regards to these terrible scenes that we saw in South Africa on a number of platforms and a number of occasions. But no doubt that will be high up on the agenda when the two heads of state actually discuss issues. But trade, as you mentioned, Mzwai, is a very pertinent issue in these talks as well, because South Africa and Nigeria share strong trade relations. Back in 2018, the total trade amounted to over 50 billion rand.
Absolutely. And that trade is quite interesting, Blaine, if you look at it closely. If you just look at it on the surface, you can see that it is hugely in favor of Nigeria, but you'll realize that it's because of the oil that we import from that country. Nigeria from South Africa, I don't think really there is so much. Of course, there is a lot of activity that is happening, and South Africa, has about 120 companies that are doing business in Nigeria. I mean, well-known brands. Who can forget the fight between the Nigerian government and one of the phone networks, the MTN, that they were having in Nigeria, because it shows the kind of the investment that this country has made in Nigeria. So, given that the relations trade-wise are so crucial, it's very important that they maintain these relations politically as well, and of course that must extend to people. In the short term, Blaine, if these relations were really to worsen, of course, in the short term, I would assume that Nigeria perhaps may be the one which will be at the receiving end because of that oil that we import from them. But in the long term, given that this country, South Africa, is looking for new markets, is looking to expand, to be able to attract investment, and Nigeria is a big market, of course, the biggest on the continent. I mean, you're talking, Blaine, here about 200 million people. So if you have products that you want to sell, that you want to export, a market like that on the continent can't be ignored. So it's very important that this issue of trade really, they look at it quite closely. And the issue of the Continental Free Trade Area that has just been recently signed. I mean, given that this country, South Africa, is the most industrialized compared to the rest of the continent, it stands to reason that by and large, this will be the country that will benefit. Perhaps explaining the reason why Nigeria was the last one to come on board, because they feel that they are not advanced enough as yet, and a country like South Africa may perhaps, in their view, I remember when they were arguing earlier that they did not want to see stuff that will be dumped into their market, so they want a situation where their people will benefit. Of course, trade, as we have been speaking, will be very top of the agenda, but the issues that relate to attacks will definitely take the center stage. Blaine, as I'm speaking to you now, the Minister of International Relations, Dr. Naledi Pando, will be joining me, perhaps to give us a bit more of what we can expect in these relations as South Africa hosts Nigeria. Dr. Pando, good morning. Thanks for joining us. We know that you've been meeting with your counterpart yesterday. South Africa has been doing a lot to try and really mend relations with Nigeria, given what had happened. So what can we expect to see happen today?
Well, we met with all the ministers who are delegation members from Nigeria. There are 8 ministers here, and we had very good discussions on a range of topics. We will issue a communique once the formal BNC meeting is concluded. I think the discussions went very well, very positive atmosphere, a commitment on both sides to strengthen relations and ensure that from now on we have heightened collaboration and partnership.
We know, Minister, that trade will be the very crucial part of these discussions. Of course, both countries need that. But we cannot run away from the fact that the events of the past, like the attacks on foreign nationals, and Nigeria then issued a very strong statement. But we know that there have been envoys going between these two countries. So that area, particularly when it comes to compensation, which they are very strong on, what is South Africa's standpoint?
Well, we have indicated that we're taking all measures that we can in order to ensure that we have a situation of security for all persons who are in South Africa. On the subject of compensation, we have a system in the country where if you own a business, you are able to get insurance, and it is insurance that would compensate for those damages. It is not the government, because we don't have such a statutory framework in our country, and so we did explain the legal position, and I think that is but a part of what we need to deliberate upon. There's a broad range of areas of cooperation, and it is those that I think will cement the relationship as South Africa, as a people, as government. We've said we don't want to see a repetition of these events, and that we're going to strengthen our efforts at ensuring that we draw Africans much closer together so that they can live in harmony.
It does appear that at government level, the relations are quite good and you are able to find each other even where you disagree. But also, Minister, there's this perception again that from the ordinary people's point of view, Nigerians and South Africans at a lower level perhaps are not as attuned to each other as government is to each other.
Well, I've been following this matter quite closely, and I've been very happy to see that in communities where there had been the level of strife that you are referring to, the communities are sitting down, talking to each other, examining what exactly has gone wrong and how they can repair the relationship. And that's what we should do. We've all said what we must work toward is social cohesion, because we're in the era of African Pan-Africanism and of building greater unity and integration. And if we are at loggerheads with each other, we won't achieve the objectives we desire. And it is Africa that will be weaker. We won't have prosperity, and all of us will lose out. So drawing together, ensuring that we assure the African continent that South Africa is a country they can trust, that the people of South Africa are a people they can trust, the better it is for the whole continent of Africa.
Thank you very much, Minister, for your time. I know we just got you when you were not. Thank you very much, Minister. That was our Minister of International Relations and Cooperation, Dr. Naledi Pando, basically saying they have done a lot of work in trying to repair the relations between the two countries, of course, underscoring, playing the fact that issue of trade and, of course, people-to-people relations will be looked at. And, of course, we asked her about the issue of compensation, and then she referred us to a system basically in the country where you own a business, you have to have it insured so that if anything happens to you, you are able to claim plain.
Mzwai, give us the TikTok of the morning. What time can we expect the Nigerian president? Mzwai, can you hear me? All right, it seems that we...
Oh, yes.
Yes, all right.
I can hear you now, yes.
Yes, I was just asking about the TikTok
Yes.
of the morning. What time can we expect the Nigerian president to arrive at the Union buildings?
Well, it should be, in terms of the time that we know of playing, it should be perhaps in the next, I think, an hour or perhaps 45 minutes, because I think at 10, I think we should get underway with the formal proceedings, the pomp and ceremony. Remember, this is a state visit plane. You would then hear that 21-gun salute. This is the highest honor that a president can afford to an incoming head of state. So it indeed points to a situation where these two countries are really trying hard to work with each other, because they know that they are the most important countries on the continent in terms of taking the continent forward. If them are not able to work together, it will be very difficult to speak with one voice in the global affairs plane.
All right, Mzwai, stand by. We'll check back with you in a short while. Thank you very much indeed for your reporting. That was our senior reporter, Mzwandile Mbeje, there.